The first rays of light broke over the savanna like a whispered promise, soft, golden, and fleeting. The air was cool, the wind slow, and the grass stood tall and motionless, waiting. Somewhere in that silence, two lions moved like shadows between the blades. Lee led, her body low, sinewy muscles brushing the dew off stalks. Kano, heavier and broader, followed a half-step behind. They moved as one, mates, hunters, partners in instinct and necessity. The herd had bedded near the acacia grove the night before, too relaxed to notice the predators tracking their scent. Antelope, zebra, even a young wildebeest calf. Limping slightly, Lee's amber eyes locked on it. Kano caught her glance. A nod passed between them. They split. She circled right, flanking low toward the dry riverbed, a sunken scar through the plain. He held left, brushing the cover of scattered brush. Timing mattered. Everything would come down to movement. Angles. A few seconds of fury. Then, a crack, a startled snort. The herd bolted, hooves tearing into dirt. Lee surged forward. She cleared the tall grass, barreled toward the calf. Then her paw hit gravel. She lost footing. In a flash, her front leg folded underneath her as she skidded down the riverbed's edge. The sound of the break wasn't loud, just a sickening snap muffled by dust. She didn't cry out. Lions don't scream, but she didn't stand either. Kano, mid-pounce on a scattering zebra, turned at the sound. His prey vanished. He didn't chase. He ran back. Lee lay twisted in the riverbed, her chest heaving, leg bent at an unnatural angle. Blood matted her forelimb where bone had pushed against skin. Dust clung to her fur. Kano approached slowly, cautiously, not out of fear but reverence. Injuries like this didn't heal. Not out here. Lee's eyes met his. She didn't need to speak. Neither did he. She tried to stand. Her paw touched ground, and folded instantly. Her whole body buckled. Kano let out a low rumble, half growl, half moan, and stepped closer, circling her in tight, protective movements. They stayed like that for hours. The sun rose higher. The heat thickened. Flies found the wound. Lee twitched, irritated, but could do little. Kano stood watch. He did not hunt. He did not leave. The herd had long vanished. The kill had failed. There would be no meat today. By midday, Lee dragged herself into shade cast by a lone thorn tree. The effort made her pant heavily. Eyes glazed with pain. Kano paced. He nosed at her injury, licked the fur around it. But he could do nothing more. He was not a healer. He was a lion. In the hours that followed, vultures circled once, maybe twice. Distant, curious. Kano snarled at the sky. When a jackal crept too close, he lunged. It fled. But the truth settled like dust. Lee couldn't move far. She couldn't run. She couldn't hunt. And in the wild, not hunting meant dying. That night, the sounds of the plains returned. Hyenas cackling in the dark. Insects rising in chorus. A soft breeze weaving through dry grass. Kano stayed by her side. Muscles tense. Eyes scanning the dark. Lee didn't sleep. Her pain was too sharp. But she didn't whimper. She was a lioness. She would not ask to be left behind. She wouldn't beg to be spared. The next morning, Kano brought her meat. Not much. Just the hind leg of a young warthog he'd killed alone. A small price for a lion. But it kept her alive. He dropped it beside her gently. Then lay beside her, silent. Days passed like this. 3, then 5, then 7. The wound crusted, swelled, festered. She couldn't walk. Kano hunted alone. Smaller game now. He returned every evening, always with food, always with eyes worn from battle and breath short from running. He kept other predators away, marked the area with growls and scent. His mane grew matted with burrs. His ribs showed. But he didn't leave. On the 9th day, rain came, soft, cleansing. Lee drank from the pooled water in the riverbed. Her body had weakened, her muscles had thinned, but she lived. That night, Kano lay beside her, pressing his flank to hers for warmth. She leaned into him. They didn't need words, didn't need sound. Every breath, every blink, every tiny twitch of tail was enough. On the 12th day, a lioness from another pride came sniffing through the grass. Younger, stronger, curious. She crept toward the scent of meat. Found Kano standing over Lee's fragile frame. The intruder froze. Kano bared his teeth. The fight was quick, brutal. Kano didn't win cleanly. He limped back to Lee bleeding from his shoulder. But the stranger didn't return. He lay down, wincing, exhausted. Lee touched her nose to his. Still, he stayed. Weeks passed. The leg never healed right. Lee could walk a few paces. No more. She would never hunt again. But she was not alone. And on the savannah, that meant something. That meant everything. The roar rose before the sun. It wasn't the deep, thunderous call of dominance that lions used to mark territory. It wasn't the guttural challenge of a male driving off a rival. This sound was raw, unsettled, calling, not warning. It came in short bursts, then longer ones, as if the creature didn't know what it was asking for, only that it had to ask. Rudo stopped mid-step when he heard it echo across the dry valley. He was a few kilometers out of base, just past the mopane trees, near where the low grass turned golden and thick. His boots had kicked dust into his coffee. That didn't matter now. He knew that sound. Not exactly, not precisely, but he felt it in his chest. Years of walking these plains, patching up poachers' damage, tending snared hyenas, calming angry elephants, all of that had taught him the rhythms of the bush. The sounds that meant life went on, and the ones that meant something was breaking. This roar belonged to the second kind. It was too mournful to be territorial, too persistent to be a mating call. It was pain, wrapped in power, trying to find ears that could understand. Rudo squatted, cupped his hand to listen closer. 3 long calls. A pause, then one more, shorter, desperate. He stood. Not right. He muttered. Not right at all. Back at his camp, he packed without a word. A coil of rope, the medical kit, tranquilizer darts, just in case, binoculars, a blade, and a canteen. He didn't need backup. Not yet. This wasn't a call for tourists or radio chatter. This was old bush instinct. You went quiet. You went alone. Rudo drove his battered Land Rover as far as the terrain allowed. Then hiked the last stretch on foot. The sun rose behind him, burning orange over the land. The roar came again, closer now. Rudo stopped at a ridge and scanned the low valley with his binoculars. There, movement in the grass. A lion. No, a large male. Powerful, pacing around something. Rudo zoomed in. Then he saw it. Another lion, lying low, not sleeping, watching. Her leg was twisted. He could see the unnatural angle even from this distance. Injured, he whispered. Bad. He stayed low, started circling wide, keeping downwind. This needed care. Lions didn't call for help. Not in the way humans thought of it. But something about Kano's behavior broke the usual script. He wasn't marking. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was looking for a witness. An hour later, Rudo reached the outer edge of the tall grass. He moved slowly now, crouched low, heart steady. Kano spotted him first. The lion rose like a storm cloud, massive, deliberate, furious. Rudo froze. He didn't run. Easy, boy, he said under his breath, one hand slowly reaching for the flare pistol on his belt. Not to fire. Just to show it. Kano snarled, teeth flashing, then stepped in front of the injured lioness, blocking her from view. His body coiled like a spring. Rudo saw the decision forming behind those amber eyes. Protect or charge. He took a slow breath. Then he did the one thing he knew might work. He knelt. A ranger kneeling in the bush was not a threat. It was a message. I see you. I'm not here to kill. Kano stood frozen, muscles twitching. Then, miraculously, he backed up. Just one step. Rudo exhaled. Slowly, he lowered his eyes, not in fear, but in respect. Then, cautiously, he unpacked his kit. It took another hour to earn their trust. Rudo never got closer than 10 meters. He didn't try to touch her. Instead, he laid the kit out in clear view, letting the scent of antiseptic and gauze drift in the breeze. He set down meat from a sealed pouch. Not close, but close enough. Kano watched everything. The lioness, Lee, smelled the food but didn't move. She couldn't. The leg was swollen now. Infected. Flies buzzed around it. Rudo knew the signs. She was fading. Without intervention, she had days, maybe less. He didn't speak, didn't move suddenly. Every action was measured, respectful. This was not his world. He was a visitor. That night, he slept in a tree. Gear strapped to him, rifle across his chest. The lions never left the clearing. Kano didn't roar again. He didn't need to. The message had been received. Someone had come. The next morning, Rudo prepared the dart. He had one shot. He waited until the sun hit full strength, when the lions were least likely to move. Then he loaded the tranquilizer and waited for Lee to shift her weight. Exposing her shoulder, he fired. The dart hit with a soft thunk. Lee flinched, but didn't flee. Kano let out a growl, a warning, but didn't attack. Within minutes, Lee sagged. Her body relaxed. Kano stepped back, uncertain. Rudo moved in fast. He knelt beside her, working quickly, gloves on, saline flush, cleaning the wound. He winced as he touched the fracture. Compound. Nasty. No way to splint it in the wild. He cleaned everything he could. Applied antibiotics. Dressed the leg. Gave a low dose of anti-inflammatory. The most he could do without dragging her out, which wasn't an option. Not with Kano here. Not with the terrain. He whispered to her as he worked. Not words really, just sound. Something soft, reassuring. Then he stepped back, packed up, and retreated to the tree. That night, Lee woke. She stirred slowly, weak but alert. Kano stepped close, nuzzled her gently. Her eyes fluttered open. She didn't try to rise, but she looked around. She saw the changed leg. She saw Rudo watching from the shadows. She didn't snarl. For the next week, Rudo stayed close. He cleaned the wound each morning, reapplied dressings, fed them meat from his supplies, monitored her breath, her reactions, gave small doses of painkillers mixed into the meat. He never touched Kano, never tried. But the big male stopped growling when he approached. Sometimes, he'd simply watch, eyes calm, distant. Rudo wrote notes in his small field book. Day 3. Raw not repeated. Male remains protective. Female alert. Appetite returning. Day 5. Swelling reduced. She attempted to sit up. Then rested. Day 7. She stood. 3 legs only, but she stood. On the 10th day, Rudo knew his part was over. She would never run again, never hunt, but she could move. Slowly, carefully, she would live. That morning, Rudo packed his kit for the last time. He left the final stretch of meat near the riverbed. Then he stood. Kano watched him rise. Rudo raised one hand, not waving, just acknowledging. Then he turned and walked away. Behind him, a lion's eyes followed his every step. But no roar came. There was no need anymore. The sun had only just begun to rise when Rudo stepped out of the brush and into the clearing. Same place, same dirt, same silence. But the air had changed. There were no roars this time. No pacing, no warning cries slicing the morning. Just stillness. Rudo slowed his steps. The savannah always gave you signs, if you knew how to listen. The wind pressed against his face from the east. The vultures weren't circling, the ground wasn't trampled, but something was off. He tightened his grip on the medkit hanging from his shoulder and moved forward. Eyes scanning every shadow. Then he saw him. Kano stood 20 meters ahead. His great frame outlined in the dusty light. Mane ruffled from the wind. His ribs more visible now than before. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't snarling. He was waiting. When Kano saw Rudo, he didn't charge. He didn't even growl. He just looked at him, eyes burning not with rage, but with something else. Plea. Rudo stopped in his tracks. No movement, no sound. Just a silent exchange between two beings with nothing in common, except for what they'd both already given up. One had risked his pride, his strength, his place in the food chain. The other had risked stepping into it. Rudo took a breath. "You remember me, don't you?" Kano didn't flinch. Rudo took a step forward. Still no reaction. He moved slowly, deliberately, keeping his body low and open. "I'm not here to take her. I'm here to help." 10 meters. 5. Kano backed away, just a step. Rudo saw past him. Lee. She lay stretched on her side under the tree. Her breath was shallow. Her flank barely moved. Flies buzzed around her eyes. And her leg, once wrapped and cleaned, was bare again. The bandages torn loose. Dirt caked into the wound. Something had changed. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't resting. She was shutting down. Rudo dropped to his knees beside her. Her fur was cold near the paw. Not stiff, but close. He pressed 2 fingers just under her jaw. Faint pulse. Still alive. Barely. He looked over his shoulder. Kano hadn't moved. He stood a few meters away. Watching. His entire body tensed like a coiled rope. "You waited," Rudo whispered. "You waited for me." He set the medkit down and went to work. He flushed the wound again. Cut away the matted fur with surgical scissors. Cleaned the crusted blood. She didn't stir. Her breathing stayed shallow. She had lost too much strength to respond. The infection had spread. Her body had fought for too long without enough energy. No more meat, no more rainwater, no more standing. And she couldn't survive another night like this. There was no option left. Not here. Not in the wild. He looked again at Kano. "I can carry her." The words weren't for him. But somehow they felt heard. Rudo stood and braced himself. He pulled the wide canvas strap from his kit and made a rough sling, looped under her front legs. Over the shoulder, the kind of carry he'd used before for injured dogs. Wounded calves. But never a full-grown lioness. She weighed more than he could manage cleanly. 200 pounds of muscle and fur and dead weight. But she was lean now. Weakened. And Rudo was strong. He adjusted the sling, squatted low, and slipped his arms underneath her. Her body was still warm near the chest. Her heart still beat. "Come on," he grunted. "You're not done." With one hard motion, he lifted. Her weight slammed into him like a wave, staggering him sideways. But he stood. He had her. Every step back toward the rover felt like moving through mud. The grass pulled at his legs. The heat pressed down from above. His breath came sharp and ragged. But he didn't stop. He didn't look back to see if Kano followed. He knew he would. And sure enough, just behind him, there was the faint rustle of grass. Steady, controlled. The lion walked with him. Not in front. Not behind. Beside. Like a sentry. Like a guardian. It took nearly an hour to reach the rover. Rudo laid her gently in the open truck bed, arranging her body to keep pressure off the injured leg. She didn't open her eyes. But she was still breathing. He slammed the tailgate shut, climbed in the cab, and fired the engine. Kano stood just outside the tree line, unmoving. Rudo looked through the window at him. "I'll bring her back," he said. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe for himself. Maybe because somehow he knew Kano understood. Then he hit the gas. Back at the small reserve station. The team scrambled to help him. No questions, just action. They sedated her fully, brought her into the shade of the treatment barn, hooked up fluids, antibiotics, pain meds, heat lamps, blood work, swabs. Rudo stayed through it all. He didn't leave her side once. She made it through the night. Then another. On day 3, she opened her eyes. 2 weeks later, she stood on all 3 legs. Her 4th splinted clean and packed. Still thin, still scarred, but alive. Rudo drove back out to the clearing that weekend. The grass had grown slightly. The wind had shifted. The area was quiet now. No sign of Kano. He walked the edge of the riverbed and found nothing. No tracks. No kills. No prints. But something made him look up. On the distant ridge, a silhouette stood watching. A lion. Large. Proud. Alone. Their eyes met again. No roar. No snarl. Just that look. Rudo raised a hand. Kano didn't move. Then, slowly, he turned and vanished into the grass. The water was ankle-deep and brackish, full of reeds and hidden stones. But Rudo pressed on. He felt every shift of weight in his shoulders, every groan in his spine. Lee's limp body clung to him like gravity itself, hot, heavy, fragile. She was still breathing, but it was shallow, labored. Her head lolled against his back, eyes half shut, and behind them, silent and tireless, Kano followed. The lion moved with purpose. Neither rushing nor hesitating. He stayed close enough to protect, far enough not to crowd. Every few steps, he paused, ears twitching, nostrils wide. He was listening, for danger, for ambush, for any reason to end this uneasy alliance. But there was none, only the steady squelch of Rudo's boots in the marsh, the faint rattle of dry leaves overhead, and the rasp of breath, his own and Lee's. The journey was long, slow, punishing. What would have taken an hour with an ATV became a full morning's walk under the rising sun. The shortcut through the riverbed saved them time but cost them comfort. Every slope threatened to pitch Rudo sideways. Every submerged route could have shattered his ankle. He never complained. He just kept walking. Midday found them on firmer ground. The wet clay gave way to cracked dirt. In the distance, the trees thickened. Beyond them, the outer fence of the protected zone. He knew the terrain, knew the cameras, knew no other lions prowled this part of the reserve. This stretch of savanna had been cleared for observation and rest. They were close. Rudo stopped to rest by a rock under a cluster of thorn trees. He knelt, slowly, letting Lee slide off his back with care. He laid her on the cool dirt, one hand under her head, adjusting her position so her injured leg stayed elevated. She stirred, barely, but didn't resist. Then Rudo looked up. Kano was standing less than 10 feet away. The lion's flanks rose and fell with slow, rhythmic breaths. His eyes didn't blink. He wasn't watching Lee. He was watching Rudo. The silence was heavier than any roar. Rudo didn't speak. Words felt useless. He simply nodded once. Then, still crouched beside the lioness, he pulled out his canteen, unscrewed the cap, and tipped a few drops onto a cloth. Gently, he wiped around her eyes, clearing the crust. She flinched slightly, her breath hitched. Still alive. Still with them. By late afternoon, they reached the safe zone. Rudo pushed open the wide metal gate by hand, one side chained open just enough to let a person through. Then he turned and waved his arm gently toward Kano. The lion didn't move. He just stared at the opening. Then at Lee, then back at the wild beyond. His instincts were clawing at him. Territory, freedom, caution. But then Lee shifted slightly. Her paw twitching, her breath rattling louder than before. Kano stepped through, one pace at a time. And just like that, he was inside the fence. No collar, no cage, no leash. He walked freely into the space where no wild lion had ever been invited without chains. Rudo led him to the old research shelter, a concrete platform shaded by canvas and surrounded by low wire. No tourists came here, no traps, just quiet, just space, just safety. He laid Lee down on a mat scavenged from the supply tent. Then he stepped back. Kano approached slowly, his massive paws making no sound on the soft ground. He crouched beside her and leaned in. His tongue touched the wound. Once. Gently, then again with more purpose. Long, deliberate strokes of rough, sandpaper tongue across the leg. The shoulder. The neck. Not frenzied, not fearful, almost ritualistic. Cleaning, comforting, claiming. Rudo sat nearby, back against a support beam, arms crossed loosely over his chest. He didn't take photos, didn't pull out a notebook. He just watched. The hours passed in silence. The breeze picked up, a few dry leaves scuttled across the floor. Kano never left her side. When Lee stirred, shifting her weight and groaning softly, he placed one paw over hers. Just enough to let her know he was there. And Rudo, mud-streaked, sunburnt, aching from the weight of her, watched it all with quiet awe. It wasn't the kind of moment you tried to explain. It was something you lived through. That night, under the soft buzz of a solar lamp, Rudo boiled water in a tin kettle. He ate cold beans from a can and drank tepid tea with no sugar. He offered none to the lion. Kano didn't need it. He just sat beside Lee, his great head resting on his front paws. They were framed in yellow light, silent sentinels. Bonded by something beyond hunger or instinct. Something deeper. Rudo sat nearby and took out his old field journal. The pages were creased and water-stained. Ink faded by years in the wild. He flipped to a clean page. Entry 218 Night. Recovered Lee. Walked 6 kilometers across marsh and ridge. Kano followed. No aggression. Carried her the full way. They are both in the shelter now. He hasn't left her once. She's still breathing. That's enough for now. He closed the book and leaned back. Overhead, stars filled the sky, unbothered, eternal, and below them, 3 lives paused together in the stillness. By dawn, Lee lifted her head, only for a second, but it was enough. Rudo saw Kano rise in an instant, licking at her cheek, tail twitching with something that almost looked like relief. She didn't stand. She didn't need to. She was alive. And she knew she wasn't alone. The next morning, as the sun rose pale and wide over the horizon, Rudo packed his things. He moved slowly, coiling his rope, sealing his medkit, wiping down the tools he might never use again. Lee no longer needed tending. Her wounds were healing, the swelling had gone down, and the light had returned to her eyes. And she wasn't alone anymore. Kano watched from a distance. Not beside her, not guarding her like before, but standing further out, halfway between the tree line and the shelter. His silhouette against the dawn was still, rooted, regal. Rudo glanced toward him once. Kano did not move. Rudo didn't call for him. He didn't wave. He didn't offer a final touch. Instead, he walked to his truck and opened the door. It creaked. He climbed in, shut it, and turned the ignition. The engine growled to life. Still, Kano stayed exactly where he was, head high, tail still, gaze fixed on the man who had carried his mate through mud, infection, and fire. Rudo didn't speak. He simply drove forward, tires crunching on gravel, dust rising behind him, and as the truck cleared the edge of the clearing, the lion raised his head and roared. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was low, drawn out, and deep enough to hum in Rudo's bones. And it sounded like thank you. Days passed. Then a week. Lee improved rapidly once she regained her strength. The medications had done their work. The leg would never be what it once was, but she could limp now. Walk slowly, move freely in short bursts. She ate, she drank, she rested, and she was never alone. The rest of the pride returned. First 2 females, distant cousins, then an old male who had known Kano from their youth. One by one, they approached with caution. One by one, they were allowed to stay. It was no longer a territory ruled by force, but by quiet gravity, by loyalty earned, not taken. Kano was no longer just a protector. He was something else now. Something more. Rudo visited from a distance. He never entered the clearing again. He didn't need to. He watched from the observation ridge. Binoculars pressed to his eyes. Recording quietly, he saw Lee walk in the grass beside her pride. Never fast. Never leading. But there, he saw Kano keeping his distance from the others when they ate. Letting them feed first. He saw the pride begin to move together again, slowly, cautiously, like muscles relearning how to work after a long sleep. Then, one morning, Rudo came to the ridge and saw nothing. No Lee, no Kano, no pride. They were gone, moved on, returned to the vast silence of the plains. He scanned for hours, walked a few kilometers, checked waterholes, found paw prints. Yes, faint, scattered, leading east, but no lions. Not that day, not the next, until one evening, he was driving the eastern perimeter road, returning from a broken fence report, when he spotted the silhouette. On the rise, under the blood-orange sky, Kano. Alone, still, watching. Rudo slowed the truck, stopped. He stepped out, 1 foot in the dirt. Didn't speak, didn't move further. Kano raised his head, held his gaze, and then, once more, he roared, that low, resonant call that seemed to ripple through the trees. Not to threaten, not to claim, but to remember. It happened again 2 weeks later. Another sighting, another stare, another roar. Every time Rudo came close. Never inside their territory, just nearby, Kano would appear. Just far enough to stay wild. Just close enough to be seen. And each time, the roar followed. Different every time, but always soft. Always thankful. There were rangers who didn't believe it. They said it was coincidence. Instinct. Noise. But Rudo knew better. He had seen the look in Kano's eyes. Not the eyes of a beast. Not even just a protector. But a mate. A lion who had loved. Who had suffered. And who had chosen to trust. Once. There are moments, Rudo would later write, that don't make sense to anyone who wasn't there. They slip past science, past logic, and root themselves in something older. Something that lives in silence. In stares. In unspoken bonds. He never touched Kano. Never petted him. Never tried to tame him. That wasn't the point. They were never friends. They were something harder to define. Two beings who had nothing in common except one truth. They had each saved the same lioness. And neither would forget it. Years later, Rudo would still remember the sound. That final roar as he walked away for the last time. Back toward the truck. Dust in his eyes. He never turned around. He didn't need to. Because he already knew what he'd see. A lion who had learned what humans often forget. That trust is risk. That love is fight. And that sometimes, just sometimes, faith crosses species.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.